can go. Yes.
I didn't do that.
Yeah, talk. You're good.
Hello. Is everybody ready for this late afternoon seminar? We are thrilled to be able to talk. I am thrilled to be able to talk about President James Garfield. He could have been a stellar president, and unfortunately, we'll find out what happened to him. I just want to introduce you to Jay Garfield, great-grandson of President James Garfield. Yes, they are a remarkable family. They were poor as church mice and lost the father, right? I mean, Garfield was only 18 months. Yeah, go ahead.
He lost his father early.
Unmute the mic.
Oh, there we go. He lost his father. He was 3, I believe, when his father got killed. Well, he was succumbed to smoke. He was fighting a field fire. So his mother had to raise him.
Yeah, so this is his little boy and his mother. Yeah. And he had a brother named Tom who was probably 10 or 11 at the time, yeah. Right? And he went to work splitting logs out in the field, and he went and earned some money, and the first money that he earned, he went to town and bought his brother James shoes. That has always touched my heart so much that his brother would think so much of him that he would spend his first money for shoes for his brother. Well, tell us some things about James Garfield that we love so much.
Well, to add on to that, he's the last president born in a log cabin. They do not know where the log cabin is. They know the area. So there is he's an interesting historical person because he can actually be traced from cradle to grave, and you stay in Northeast Ohio. You can do it in a day. And so you can go, there's a little area, and there's a mocked up cabin there, and it's from the Pepper Pike Historical Society. And then you can go down the road about 15, 20 miles and go to Hiram College, where when he and Lucretia were there, it was the Western Reserve Eclectic Institute. And then they bought a home when they were married, they bought a home in Hiram. That home still stands today. It's on the campus of Hiram College, and Hiram actually owns the house now. And you can now go, well, then from there you go to Mentor, where they resided while he was a congressman and eventually elected to be president. And then he's buried in Lakeview Cemetery, which is actually very close to downtown Cleveland. It's a very historical cemetery, actually. John D. Rockefeller is also buried there, and so is part of Elliot Ness. So Elliot Ness, I know it's funny, but he was actually, before he was in Chicago, he was actually the director of the police in Cleveland, Ohio. And so he went from basically Cleveland to Chicago.
So he went a lot of things. He did a lot of things before he ever got to the White House.
Yes, he did. So he was, a farmer. The home that he bought in Mentor specifically was to be the family farm. They bought it and they immediately added onto it because they were having more children. And then from there, he was also elected to represent the state of Ohio. So he was a state representative for years, and then was elected to the Senate. But also, in the meantime, he was also a preacher, and he became a lawyer. And his first case that he ever tried was actually in front of the Supreme Court, and he won.
What was it?
Look it up. I don't know.
My daughter would say, Google it, Mom.
Yeah, Google it. Google it. Somebody can do that real quick. Go. Ulysses is doing it. That a boy. There you go.
Okay, but then along came the Civil War,
And along came the Civil War.
and he didn't have any military experience, really.
Not a lick. Not a lick. So he, in his true Garfield way, he read as much military strategy as he could get a hold of. And those books are still at the house today. The library that's in the house that Lucretia had built after his death still contains all of those books.
And that's like the first presidential library, really, outside of Jefferson,
Yeah.
sort of.
There's a bone of contention,
Ah.
and actually with another Ohio president, the Hayeses. So the Hayeses actually built the first, I believe, the freestanding presidential memorial library. Lucretia built a memorial library, but it wasn't really for the public. It was for her and the family and everything else.
So what's in that? What kind of books are in there? What did they read?
Wow, they read everything. So they love poetry. He was an avid reader of Shakespeare, military, political, economics. They dabbled in everything. They really wanted to know, about the day and what's out there and what's going on. So they were really learned folks. When
And
it comes
Lucretia,
to that
too.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, I'm talking. Both of them were. I had. My brother and I were extremely lucky. We ended up working at the house in Menor when we were in college, and we got to work with my grandfather, who's now passed away. But he was out doing some volunteer work out there, and he would help with the grass, and they needed help cutting the grass out at Lawn Field, and it wasn't owned by the National Park Service at the time. It was actually owned by the Western Reserve Historical Society. So my brother and I needed jobs, and my grandfather said, well, why don't you boys come up and work? And we said, okay, and what are we going to do? And, well, you're going to cut the grass, boys. And we said, cut the grass. Okay. We started in the front on Monday, and we got to the back on Friday because we were two 21-inch deck Craftsman push-behind mowers. So we got to walk the property a little bit.
And you got strong.
And we got strong. But you know what? It was a great time because we got to hear a lot of stories from my grandfather about the property. My grandfather was born on that property. There's actually a church that's next door, and there's a house that's built alongside the church, or the church is actually built alongside the house. That's the home that he grew up in, and he was born in that house. So, and the family owned that house up until 1936, when they decided that it should be, given to the public, and they can, go through it. The unique part about the house is that 85%, and maybe higher, maybe lower than that, of the articles that are in the house, James Garfield himself would have had in his hands. He would have known what they were. So when the family gave all of that over, they gave everything. So there's not a lot of personal stuff of the presidents and Lucretia's that are out there in the world because it's at the house. It's in the museum. So it's very lucky in that respect. And when he died, there was a big outrage for the public to make sure that she was taken care of because there was no pension for the widows at the time. So a lot of money got sent to them, and they're, she couldn't use all the money, and they weren't destitute. I mean, they had the farm, and it was a working farm, and the boys were working, and so they were pretty okay. The money did help, of course, but she decided that she was going to build the library onto the home, and they built a third floor, and they did a couple of things to make it bigger, so more families. So the boys were getting older, they were going to get married, so they knew that there was going to be a lot more people around, and Lucretia's father and then her brother actually came up and lived at the house for a little while as well. So they did a lot. So in that memorial library, she built a vault, and it's a big walk-in concrete and steel vault, and between her and Joseph Stanley Brown, who was President Garfield's secretary and then later married Molly Garfield, they put all the papers and got everything settled in the vault, so they saved everything. So that was a really big, kind of a big deal. She had the wherewithal to say, hey, we need to preserve this stuff. It's going to matter at some point. Now most of that stuff, the paperwork is all at the Library of Congress now, and their diaries and letters are digitized. You can actually go on the Library of Congress and look those up.
Well, tell me about his military service.
Well, he believed that he needed to serve, and got commissioned as a colonel and was to put together a unit. And he put together the Hiram Boys. It was the part of the 42nd Ohio Voluntary Infantry, and he put those together. And he, like we talked about earlier, he didn't go to West Point. He didn't know much about the military. He read a whole bunch of stuff, and then felt that he was prepared, and he went to war. I know he fought at Antietam. I know that he was at the Battle of Middle Creek. The Battle of Middle Creek is where he got commissioned to Brigadier General. I believe that's correct. And then he fought at Chickamauga. And then Lincoln actually called him back to his seat because Lincoln was having a hard time at that time passing things and getting things done, and he needed someone that could rally the troops, basically, and said, listen, you're doing a great job out there, but you know what, we need you back here. So he eventually said, fine, I'll come back, and then he came back.
There's a story that I love about his brother, because when he was tiny, he would wake up cold, and he'd say, Thomas, cover me up, I'm cold. And he was in Kentucky, maybe, I'm not sure. But he was sharing a tent with Rosencrantz. And he was muttering and everything. And Rosencrantz says, what's wrong? And he says, oh, I dreamed I was back home with my brother. Cover me up, I was cold. I mean, this brother story is really, we'll get a little bit later on to that, but.
Well, even better, he didn't really think much of Rosecrans either.
What?
So he didn't think much of Rosecrans either.
Okay. So are there military stories about him that you can think of?
I know in the Battle of Middle Creek, the reason that he got commissioned was there was a problem going on with communication, and he said, fine, I'll get it done, and hopped on a horse and got the communication, and they ended up winning the battle because he was able to get to the communication and back and got everybody organized. So in my mind, that's his biggest accomplishment war-wise, and then he obviously got commissioned.
So after the war, what happened to him then? What did he do then?
Well, he was he finished out with Lincoln, of course, and while he was in Congress, and then he got elected to the Senate, and then he was going to the convention, 1880 in Chicago, to nominate John Sherman against Blaine and Sherman and Grant. And if you've seen the movie Death by Lightning, the three guys that were being nominated actually were not at the convention. So it's a little bit of a little artistic license they used in that, which is fine. But during that time, the from what I have read and from what I understand, it really wasn't that much of a surprise that he was nominated to be a dark horse candidate. The talk had been going around, and he had heard the talk, and he had actually written letters to Lucretia back and forth talking about, and he talked about it in his diary as well, that, there's talk, and he's like, it's just not my time, and I'm not, I'm not the guy. I don't think I'm, my time will come. And he felt that his time would come. And Lucretia felt his time would come too. But Lucretia also said, probably not the time. And, well, the delegates from Indiana had a different idea. So he gets done speaking, nominating John Sherman, and the last part of his, and this was in the movie, and it's actually true, the last part of his thing, he says, "Gentlemen, what do we want?" And a delegate from Indiana jumps up and goes, "We want Garfield." And then the place, the Crystal Palace in Chicago went nuts. And they had, he's trying to calm him down. He's like, no, this is, I'm not here for that. I'm here for, well, the ball just got rolling. And then 36th ballot later, he was the nominee. So he did not take his seat at the Senate. And then I believe that actually John Sherman does take his spot. I think that's right. I think that John Sherman actually takes his Senate seat.
You always have to wonder about what somebody like Sherman would feel like when he thought that Garfield was going to holler his name.
Well, John Sherman asked him to nominate him probably at John Sherman's folly. You ask a guy that talk around that he's going to be, at some time he's going to be nominated. Well, he makes a good speech. And at the time, Garfield was considered probably one of the best Republican speakers out there. So you ask that guy to nominate you, buyer beware, I guess.
Buyer beware. Yes, buyer beware. Then he actually was elected.
He was. He ran against Winfield Winfield Scott.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Winfield Scott is a great big fat general who served in Mexico. So.
Yeah. Well, he did Civil War too, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then he came head to head with Roscoe Conkling.
He came head to head with Roscoe Conkling. And such a good dynamic, not a good dynamic, such a rough dynamic for him. And this is, basically the whole battle between he and Conkling is about who has the power to put people into political seats. And Garfield wanted to put somebody in the collector's position for New York. And Conkling thought that he had the right to tell Garfield who to put in, and Garfield said, that's not, you don't have that right. So.
Well, Conkling got a lot of money for putting people into
Well,
positions.
he got money. He got what he thought was fame. He thought he got power. He thought, much to Conkling's folly in the end as well. Roscoe Conkling and Senator Platt from New York, in the end, because the Garfield got everybody to say, "Hey, listen, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna say okay to who you want in the collectorship of New York." Platt and Conkling resign, and they think to their folly that they're going to go back to Albany and they're going to just fawn all over him and go, "Oh, you were right. We want you. We need you back." Well, they didn't. No one called. They said, "Good riddance." And those guys were basically never seen or heard from again.
That's a power of principle in a man.
Right.
And that's what Garfield had. He had the power of principle. He wanted to have like a service. What's the word I want?
Civil service.
Civil service where.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is he's the civil service reform started with President Garfield and how seats are filled by the president and who gets them no longer fell on what, who helped you out in the election, which is also something that ends up getting him in the long run killed.
Yeah.
Is that, again, if you've seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, by the way, go to Netflix, if you have Netflix, and see Death by Lightning. It's a wonderful show. The characters, the men and women who play the characters, spot on, nailed every single person the way you think they should have been played. And the man who plays Guteau, who shot Garfield in the train station in D.C., played him perfectly.
So tell us about this Guteau.
Well, I mean, he did what he thought. He thought he called himself a stalwart, which was the faction of the Republican Party that Roscoe Conkling was part of, and then he campaigned for Garfield. He actually when Garfield gets elected, he actually goes to the White House and asks him for a job, or tries to ask him for a job, and tries to get an audience with the president. If you don't know, at those times, when the president was elected, it was his job to receive people at the White House that were asking for positions, asking for jobs. Can you imagine walking into the White House now and, hey, we got, I need a job. Can you put me in the post office down the street? I mean, that's what was going on. And so he actually, shook hands with Garfield. He shook hands with Chester A. Arthur. They met. And he does run into Lucretia at one point. It's just, he was a weird kind of guy. And if you read the book, Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard, explains a lot of this way better than I'm doing. It's just astonishing. You got to also think, no Secret Service. So they're running around Washington, D.C. Guteau actually stalks Garfield for a few days. Garfield would go out and walk with Blaine, his Secretary of State. They would just walk around D.C. Well, Guteau was following him. So, they would just walk around. And Garfield liked to ride horses, and so did Lucretia, and they would go out riding. Just take off from the White House and go.
What was Lucretia? Didn't Lucretia have a feeling about this weird guy?
I don't know if there was any feeling about it. There is a little story that they were in church and in D.C., and Guteau apparently was there and got up to make some sort of speech or talk, or I'm not sure. It was basically a disturbance. And Garfield actually writes about it in his diary, that there was a strange person at church that caused some type of ruckus at the church that day that they were in church. So Garfield even knew, didn't know him, but knew
Weirdness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Guteau thought he'd gotten Garfield elected. He thought it was his workings, his campaigning that got Garfield elected. And of course, he was weird. He really didn't. So, it's one of those weird things that politicians have to deal with. All right. So tell us what happened then.
And without the Secret Service, so that he's right there, and you're right. Again, go back and read Candace Millard's book, because they go into a little bit in depth about kind of the things that Guteau did, and he was part of this commune in New York that was a free love commune, and he actually gets kicked out of that because he's weird.
I forgot
yeah,
that.
no, it's an amazing thing, and they actually do it. They actually talk about that a little bit in Death by Lightning too. But Candace actually gives a little bit more in depth about like what that commune was actually like, and so it's a little more in depth. But it's you're like, oh, okay, well, this weirdo did that. So eventually he decides on the day that he's going to do this, and Garfield is actually going to. He's actually going on vacation. He's going to go take a break. It's in July. And he walks into the train station in D.C., and he's with Blaine, and his boys, two oldest boys, are actually in the chariot, not chariot, in the carriage behind him. And Guteau comes basically out of the shadows up behind him and shoots him. And fires twice, I understand. First one grazed his arm, and the second bullet went into his back. And then they pretty much grab Guteau right off the bat, and Guteau yells out. Now I'm going to lose the words. Guteau yells, "I've killed the president, and now Arthur. I shot him, and now Arthur will be president." And he thinks that Arthur is going to, in his mind, Arthur is going to actually
give him a good job.
Give him clemency and then give him a job.
Yeah. Well, tell us about what happened then with Guteau.
Well, then Guteau goes to jail, and he's in the trial. At the trial, he actually and actually kind of right says, "Hey, listen, I did shoot him, but I didn't kill him. The doctors did." So the horrifying part of the book that Candace writes is about the medical care that he actually got. And I'm a medical professional myself. I'm an athletic trainer. So I'm reading this stuff. And in our family, we did not talk about this part a lot. So, what growing up as a kid, as a Garfield, is he was shot in the train station, he lingered for a long time, and you just didn't really get the whole story. So really the first time that I really dug deep into this story was when I read it in Candace's book. And I was shocked. Really, my brother's a firefighter paramedic too. So when he's reading it, he's going, "Oh my Lord, they just did everything wrong." He falls in the station. It's a dirty train station floor, and they're sticking their bare fingers in the wounds, trying to find the bullet. And it's like, what are you doing? And they finally, somebody brings in a dirty old mattress, and they throw him on this mattress, and they get him back to the White House eventually, and there's two doctors that see him right off the bat on the train station floor, and actually one of them was a black physician, and he is telling people to stop sticking their fingers into this man because you're gonna cause infection. Well, at the time, antisepsis was not a fully accepted policy in the United States. As a matter of fact, it was very little. It was being practiced in England because of Lister, who was the one that really first started saying things about it. But the American doctors were like, "Yeah, we can't see germs. What the heck are you talking about?" They just really didn't believe it. But this black physician was like, "Hey, listen, and they basically, hiked him out of there and said, "Beat it, you don't know what you're talking about." And a doctor named Bliss, and this is very true, and I'm not making it up. This guy's name was Dr. Bliss. His first name was Doctor. So this guy takes over, and their belief is that, one, they need to find the bullet so he can survive, and two, infection was a good thing. All the pus, everything that was coming out of him was healthy, was going to help him out, which is horrific to even think about. So this poor guy is in the White House. There's no air conditioning in the White House. It's July. It's hot. Also, the swamps in Washington, D.C. were not as clean. And so there was an awful smell always around the White House. Even some of the first ladies previously had mentioned about the air in Washington, D.C. is not the greatest. And that wasn't just a political thing that they were talking about. They were trying everything. And at the time, a newspaper would come out. They would get editions in a newspaper in a day, 2, maybe 3 times a day. So, and there was something in that. They were talking about his condition by the hours. He's doing great today. He's not doing great now. and it would go up and down. And of course, his mother back in, who was actually now is in Menor, back in Menor, Ohio. He's suffering. He's writing to his mom, "Hey, I'm going to be fine." And there's actually the one letter that he wrote her saying that he was going to be okay is actually hanging in the house in Menor. It's actually there. But as we know, he doesn't survive. But one of the people that come in to help find the bullet is actually Alexander Graham Bell. So he comes in and he has basically invented a metal detector. No, it was Bell. Yeah, it was Bell. So they don't find it. They don't find the bullet, that the machine didn't work. Well, there was a 2-part problem. One of the main problems is the bed that he was on had metal springs. So that was kind of a problem. Kind of a problem. But the second part of the problem was that Bliss refused to let Bell check the other side of his back, which actually the bullet was on. They would only do the side where the bullet entered because Bliss wholly believed that it was on that side. And so Bell leaves the White House dawned on Bliss's end as a failure. It didn't work. So, he goes away and they're still probing him. They're sticking instruments in there and they're sticking their fingers still in there. And they do it for weeks. And they finally think he had gotten to a period where he was doing okay, but not great still. And they think, well, you know what will help him? The sea air will help him. Let's get him to New Jersey. And so they go to basically a resort in New Jersey where Grant is. Well, Grant's son is there, and Grant eventually comes there to visit his son, and then actually does see Lucretia and pays his respects to Lucretia in New Jersey. But they end up having to build train tracks up to the house that he's going to be at, and they take it all the way up, and then they can't get the engine up there, so they have to push the car up, and they get a bunch of people, and they all push the car up to the basically the front door where they had built these temporary tracks, and they put him in there, and they clean air, and they think he's going to survive, and he, as we know, he eventually passes away right there in New Jersey.
Am I disremembering this? What was Robert Lincoln?
Robert Todd
shot?
Lincoln was there around. He was. We just talked about this too. I believe he was in the administration, wasn't he? Yeah, I believe he was in Garfield's administration, or he was working with him. I know that Robert Todd was in and around the assassinations up until obviously Kennedy. So he had been a part of the first 3 assassinations.
Yeah. Isn't that bizarre? Yeah. And I want to. I'm also thinking.
Secretary of War. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. My
Thank you
my right hand, Ulysses
for your
Grant. Thank
Googlers.
you very much.
So, when he was shot, somewhere in my brain, I'm thinking, "Oh, Crete, be careful how you tell her."
She was there.
Oh.
So they were. So it was. They were there. Molly was there. They were. The boys weren't. The boys were at school. But they and the little ones, the two younger boys, were back at the house with their uncle and their grandfather. So
Crete saw him get shot?
no, Crete wasn't there with the shooting, but
Oh.
she was. I mean, she was still in DC. She had to come back to DC because I think she was already at where they were going to vacation. Actually, I think they were going to New Jersey to vacation. I think that's right. I know that I think the itinerary was they were supposed to go to Menor and then to New Jersey, I think is how that was supposed to go. But so she was there when he passed. She was
Yeah.
with him in New Jersey.
What we 300 days?
Yes, close.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
300 days for a man that would have been a blessing to this country. A man of principle, a man of strength, a man of intelligence, a man of spirit. And we lost him.
We did.
We did.
We did. He he had people like Frederick Douglass campaigning for him too. So, he was a strong abolitionist, and it would have been a really interesting world for us if he had lived and gotten to, because he really wanted to really kickstart Reconstruction back up again and really repair things that were still broken.
Yeah.
And I think in the long run he would have. And there were the Fisk Singers were actually guests at the Garfield's home twice in Menor, which was a big singing group, historically black college in Tennessee. The Fisk Singers were there on tour, and they stopped in Menor twice and sang for the Garfields and came into the house and had lemonade with the Garfields.
Came into the house.
Came into the house.
Came into the white man's house and had lemonade.
Yep.
Okay, you have anything else to say?
No, but I'll field questions.
I know. I'm sure you guys must have questions about this amazing man. Yes,
Everywhere.
Mr. Libertarian.
As a kid, I can remember listening to a song sung by John Cash about the assassination. I don't know if you've heard it, what you thought of the family part of it.
I have heard it.
Tell him what he said.
He said that he, as a kid, he heard a song that was written and sang by Johnny Cash about Garfield, and it's President Garfield has been shot down. And yes, I have heard it. Yes, I have. And it's on YouTube. You can find it.
Oh, man. All right, then. Anybody else? Yes?
So the 300 days that he was separated, was he still operating as president, or had Arthur stepped in? Actually doing the opposite?
From what I understand, it was kind of, well, he wasn't running the show. He really couldn't. I think Blaine was doing a little bit of work behind the scenes. Arthur, you have to understand, Arthur was kind of the compromise running mate for him. He was put in at first to calm down Conkling, which obviously didn't happen. But Arthur's a really interesting guy in the long run, because in the long run he actually changes and comes around and goes, you know what, I've been going about this the wrong way, and actually during his presidency kind of picks up where Garfield left off, not fully, but he changed. I mean, he wasn't the Republican that he was while he was president.
Anyone else? Yes.
What did your family do then? Did you get told, or what did they think?
What did my family think about Guteau? You know, my immediate family now, you know, what do we think? We think, you know, the guy's, you know, killed our ancestor and he's not a good guy. You know, at that point, they were so upset with what was going on with him and how long he lingered. I don't think they had a lot of time to really be. Of course, you're angry at somebody for doing that to your family member, but you know, there was hope that he was going to live in the first place. So I don't know how much animosity there was built up in that whole thing. I could tell you this: not a lot was talked about him in our family. So everything that I know about him, I read.
So he was tried just like right away, wasn't he?
I believe it was a year after.
A year?
Yeah.
And he was
Hung.
hanged.
He was hanged.
All right, he was hanged. All
Yeah.
right. Anybody else?
Oh, and if you've seen the show, Lucretia did not go to the jail and see Guteau. They did that for a very specific reason, and actually, you're not angry about it. They really wanted to show her resolve and that she'd had some strength, and it was probably the quickest way they were going to be able to do that artistically without making everything much longer. And she was a strong woman at that point. I mean, she's got 5 kids she's got to raise now.
What was the name of the movie?
Death by Lightning. It's on Netflix.
What was the name of the book?
The Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard. And the book is, the movie is based off the book. I had one more question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good question. So she wants to know, has the family been invited to screenings and stuff like that? So interestingly, Candace Millard, when she was writing the book, she had visited Lawnfield and Menor several times, of course, and had asked the Park Service if there were any Garfields hanging around. Well, the Park Service people said, well, hang on to your hat, because there's a few of them here. And so yeah, she actually got in contact with us while she was writing the book. And the reason that she did, and I think it's a great reason, she wanted to know what the family was like. Maybe even, do you think stuff carried over? So she ended up, maybe to her folly, I don't know. She she came to our house 3 times for dinner, and she got the full Garfield experience. The Garfield, my immediate family is, we didn't have a lot of girls, so there was a lot of boys running around there, and we're a pretty rambunctious group, and so those dinners, and the funnier thing is my mom was still alive at the time, so we had it at my mom's house, and my mom's, I had asked my mom, and she said, yeah, that's great, let's have her over. And I said, so what do you think, what are you going to make, Mom? She goes, I'm going to order pizza. I said, all right, rock on, Mom. Let's just have a pizza party. And we did. And you know what? Candace loved it, and she had such a great time. And then it's such a good time, she came back 2 more times. So now she's an adopted Garfield. She's written a couple other books. She wrote a book before she wrote the Garfield book. She wrote... now I'm losing the mic. River of Doubt, and it was about Teddy Roosevelt on the Amazon River with his son Kermit.
That was the most terrifying book I ever read.
It is, and it's pretty enlightening. You know, at one point not to spoil it, but at one point Kermit, Teddy had told Kermit to leave him there. He was going to die in the Amazon, and Kermit said, "Not a chance, Dad." They got him out, but she's written a couple other books after that, and but I have my favorite, and of course we know what that is. But you know, she was so right on with what she did, and I think because she did spend that time at our house with us, that she got a little bit more into the Garfield family as it is. And my daughter is actually named Molly, because when I was always growing up, I thought, well, if I ever had a daughter, James A. Garfield needs to have a daughter named Molly, because James A. Garfield had a daughter named Molly. And my wife relented and said, yeah, that's good. So found the right woman, I guess, at that point. But when the movie came out, or when all of this stuff, we knew that they were in production. Candace had actually let us know that they were doing that. And when the movie came out, we actually ended up having a family screening at Hiram College. So the Hiram community came out, some local, my friends, my brother's friends, my uncle's friends. We had a lot of people there. There was probably about, I think about 300 people at the screening, and they showed the first episode. So we got to see it with 300 of our closest friends.
You know, the title, Death by Lightning, came from one of James Garfield's.
Right, from his diary page, correct? Or-
Yeah, from his diary page. Can you remember what the whole thing was?
I do not.
Oh.
She knows, but so tell me.
Something to the effect that you can't worry about death by lightning, or Google it.
Google it. Yeah.
Being a descendant of the president, so back in your elementary days, we're all learning about presidents and everything. So did any teacher, like, oh, hey, we have a descendant of Garfield here. Did they put you on the spot in elementary, or treated, what was that like?
No teacher ever put us on the spot, which was good on them. And they never asked really. Two quick stories with that. One, when they were registering me for kindergarten, you have to put your mom and dad's name, and my mom's Sally Garfield, blah, blah, blah. My dad, James Rudolph Garfield III, and then they put my name down, James A. Garfield III, and a couple of days later, some board person or whatever from the school calls and says, hey, you got the names wrong. And she said, no, I didn't. She said, well, there's no way that your son can be the third because your husband's the third. She goes, it's different names. And she goes, what do you mean? There's James Garfield. No, he's James Rudolph Garfield III, and my son is James Abram Garfield III. They got that, they were making the assumption that you couldn't be a James Garfield. Well, the names are different. So we weren't called out in school. Most of the teachers ended up knowing. My mom was very involved with the PTA, and we could never do anything wrong at school because she was like always there. So we did. I got in trouble, and then I got in trouble because she was right there. But it was an easy person to pick when you had to write a report. Oh, well, I'll write about James Garfield. So I wrote a lot of reports about James Garfield in my time. So did my brothers. My nephew, who is just graduated from high school, has actually written a book about Garfield. It's called The People's Choice, and he wrote about his time in Congress. It's a short book. It's 45 pages long. He self-published it. My nephew is an amazing kid. His name is John Garfield. You can buy it, and I'm going to plug it now. You can buy it on Barnes & Noble website.
Is he the one that's getting ready to run for office?
Well, he at some point, look for John Garfield because he's going to do that. He wants to go fly jets first. So he's working on, he's going to South Carolina for college, and he's going through the ROTC there, and he will he wants to fly jets off of boats, so he wants to be in the Navy.
That's a Garfield for you.
Well, we've all been in the Army except until John now going. Well, my one cousin actually was a Marine, so he'll be the second Garfield that kind of ventured outside of the Army, but he just did that because he had done his capstone in high school about about Garfield's time in Congress, and was taking a gap year and was bored. He didn't even tell my brother or my sister-in-law that he was writing the book, and one day he comes downstairs and he says, "Hey, I wrote a book." My brother goes, "Really? You wrote a book?" He's like, "Yeah, I wrote a book. It's Barnes and Noble's going to publish it for me. All you got to do is order it."
And is it about Garfield or what?
Yeah, it's about his time in Congress.
Oh, his time in
Yeah.
Congress. Oh, cool.
I knew that he was a great orator, and there was one instance like where they thought they'd invite him to town as a preacher. They thought that he'd do no good, but by the time he got done, all the bad places had shut down. You want to think about that?
No, but I'd like to learn about that. That's interesting.
What did you say?
He was known as a good orator and a preacher, and what'd you say, shut down?
He went into a town with several hundred people, and they said he would do no good. There's no way because of all the gambling and prostitutes and everything else. They thought he would do absolutely no good, that they'd run him out of the rail. But he wound up shutting all those places down as a result of his preaching because he was such a great orator, and the town turned upside down.
I got to find that story. I don't know it.
No, but what did he say?
Oh, he said that he was they didn't think he was going to do any good to the town if he spoke, but ended up that he did. Right? Correct?
For President Garfield is.
Was he president then, or was it just?
I'd have to check it out. I have 40,000 books, but I'd have to check it
Okay. Okay.
out. So it's during that certain period.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Say it for us.
Assassination can no more be guarded against than death by lightning, and it is not best to worry about either.
There you go.
What to say?
Assassination cannot.
Can no more be guarded against than death by lightning, and it is not best to worry about either.
You have to realize I have hearing aids in. So I have to have mentors come. Okay?
Yeah. All right.
Well, look at the time.
One-
We just
one-
nailed
Can we go
it.
one more?
So, we went in, and I believe it was like he's buried in a shrine type, right?
In a monument.
So there's a story behind that, right?
Which one? Yeah. I mean, I know a story about it, but
Like all the mosaics and all that, it was like the town comes and
well, the country actually got behind it. And the big thing is the money that was collected for it was a majority of the money was collected from elementary school children who would bring pennies into school and donate the pennies. And so that money was helped to build the monument in Lakeview Cemetery. They in the late 1980s they had to refurb it, and so they actually got the inside completely refurbished and washed and cleaned up, and it looks great inside. And they were going to go and do the outside of the monument. The outside of the monument is done in sandstone, and it was a very soft sandstone. And they started to clean the sandstone. The sandstone would turn black, basically, from the industrial part of Cleveland, because it's on top of this hill in the city of Cleveland that looks down over the actual city. And so it just turned black. I've always known it as black. Well, in the late 80s, they tried to clean it. Well, they were removing the sandstone, not cleaning the sandstone, so they had to stop. They couldn't do it anymore. So recently, they found a new process, and they've actually cleaned it up. And now the monument is blonde, and it looks great. but it does not look like how I knew it when I grew up. It's clean, it's bright, it's shiny, and so it's a little weird. But they did a lot of great work. There was some loose bricks around some of the decking around the monument, and they fixed all that. And it's a beautiful monument. They really did a nice tribute to him. And there's both caskets are there. Lucretia and James are down in the vault, and also in urns are Molly and Joseph Stanley Brown are also there. Molly is. No, Lakeview Cemetery did. Lakeview Cemetery did it. They're a privately owned cemetery.
Well, we're just delighted that you all came this late and learn about this man that could have made a great change in our country. So we just have to remember his principles, remember his honesty, remember his strength, and take it on as our own and go forward and upward and stronger in this country. Thank you, God.
Thanks, Mary.